Our guest this morning is one of the world's great Shakespearean scholars and directors. He served as the master of fight for Shakespeare's Globe, choreographed Mark Rylance's Hamlet, has worked at the Royal Opera House and the National Theatre Studio, among others, and has given master classes around the globe. Haha. He also served as the head of the drama school for LAMDA, and for me, like many of us, was the first representative of the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art that I ever met. So please welcome to the chair opposite me, the inimitable Rodney Cottier. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
I want to start with, Rodney, what do you remember about your audition for LAMDA in the 1970s?
There were only two people on the panel, first time round, and then we were called back and there were a different two people. We did them one by one, came into what was then our theatre, the McKern Theatre, two people on the panel, and I decided I was going to do Edmund from King Lear, because I just played Edmund, so I thought that was fair enough, having done that at RADA and everywhere else. And having discovered that everybody else was doing Edmund, I then changed my mind, and so I did a bit of Hamlet.
Wow.
Because I just played Hamlet for the second time. And so I said to the panel, it's a little bit short, and one of them said, fine, shorter the better. Okay, here we go. And so I took off one of my sandals, and I used it as a skull. And I did, alas, poor Yorick. I knew him, Horatio, and then I did a bit of Andre from Max Frisch, Andorra. Got called back, did the same things with the sandal, and I got a phone call. But what I really remember more than anything else about the audition, there was a wonderful student who looked after us in the foyer. Her name was Dilly Keane, and she was, it turned out, going to be 2 years above me. And she was so wonderful at talking to students, getting them to relax, and you really felt that the school wanted you to be at your best. And I remember after the audition when I was off to place, I actually wrote a card to Dilly thanking her for the way she put us all at ease. And hey presto, Dilly founded a company called Fascinating Aida. They're still going strong, and she turned up to my 60th birthday party, so there you go.
That's great. And at your 60th birthday party, there's a picture online of you with your sandal. Is that you reenacting the audition?
Reenacting the audition and talking about Dilly, who was in the audience. Yeah, absolutely right.
That's wonderful. When you were at LAMDA, did you have a sort of Rodney figure, somebody that was sort of like this steward of the student body?
Well, it was during my time when the Student Union was founded. So we had some wonderful people, both on the board, people like Brian Cox, who used to turn up in his motorbike leathers, and we formed the Student Union with these members of the board who were alums, and so there was this incredible camaraderie we had. But also, as part of the school, there was this extraordinary guy, Joseph Giel. He was Polish, and the room in the middle of the building of Tower House, which is where we were on Earls Court Road, was room 9. And if you think it was a classroom, oh no, it wasn't. That was Joe's room. That was the common room. That's where all the staff, all the students gathered throughout the day, cigarette in mouth, because we were allowed to smoke and did in class. It's where he had his tea set up, his coffee, he made the sandwiches and everything else, and he really looked after us throughout our time there. And Joe was with LAMDA for, I think, 33 years. An extraordinary man. He was in the last cavalry charge of the Polish cavalry against the German tanks. So he had a story.
That's incredible. And after your audition, you got in, and you've become sort of the first port of entry for a lot of the students that are currently here at LAMDA. What is it that you're looking for when you see students come into the audition room? Are you looking for talent, potential, or just work ethic?
Humility.
Humility.
That's very important. I mean, we'll probably go on to discuss for various qualities that you need, but it's that you don't want somebody who's going to come in and do a triple Salchow double that's 9 camel spins, and you're going, wow, this was incredible, but I don't understand a word of it. But it's when you actually talk with them, and there is this desire that they have. But also, the reason I use the word humility is because that is absolutely key to the ensemble, which is the basis of, I think, all great acting.
Can you explain to me how one becomes an Olympic fencer?
No, I can't, because I never became an Olympic fencer.
Oh, no.
Oh, there are lots of rumours that I was. No, because unfortunately what happened is I got whiplash.
Oh.
When I was competing. I did compete to quite a high level, but what happened was I went forward very, very fast, and when you go forward, your head throws back, and there was a crunch. And what had happened was I had fused 2 vertebrae together, and I wore a surgical collar for a year. And so that was at the age of 18, and that was the end of my fencing career. But yes, I mean, there are wonderful rumours about being in the Olympics. No, I wasn't. I missed them by 2 years. There were rumours that I was a Michelin star chef. No, I wasn't. I never have been. But that, of course, is, yeah, I mean, I'm used to rumours.
It's part of the mystique at this point.
Yes,
You know?
yes.
I have a hypothetical for you here. It's Jacobean era, and your castle's about to be invaded, and you have genuine, sharpened, full-weight versions of all the weapons you use in your teaching. Mm-hmm. What are you reaching for first to do some actual damage?
Right, well, if I'm indoors, you're going to need something that's fast, but you're also going to need something for close quarters, because you may be on a spiral staircase. If you're on a spiral staircase, swinging a sword's not going to be a particularly good idea, but a knife is going to be a pretty good idea. So in other words, what I would use is the classic Jacobean rapier and dagger, the magbush dagger and the swept hilt rapier with the light blade, because you need to get in and get out and use speed.
How does the answer change if you're in like a dueling arena or an open battlefield?
Well, that's 2 different things completely. A dueling arena would be indoors, possibly. Okay. I mean, it could be the lists. Let's take a battlefield. Well, what you would probably have, because that was the joy of the swept hilt rapier, is the swept hilt. You could take one blade out, the light blade that you'd use for civilian work, and you'd replace it with what looks in fact like a cavalry saber. So you clip in your heavier blade, because, I mean, if you're putting me on a battlefield, I think the most important thing is to put me on a horse.
Yeah.
So that I can run away. If you could get on your horse, wear a bit of metal, not a lot, because in the Jacobean period you're wearing a lot more leather than you would be the medieval full set of armour, and you'd use something for, in effect, cutting. Yep, and obviously you can stab with it. So I use the swept hilt rapier, but with the wider blade.
Lovely. Would you give us sort of a vague, because I know you just returned from the States, from the lecture tour, which is sort of your first section of the academic year.
Yeah.
Can you give us a vague outline of what the lecture tour looks like? How many states you're going to? How many schools?
Well, it varies. I mean, what we try to do is rotate.
Okay.
So, for example, you go northeast, southeast, blah, 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 you go around. This year we went for the middle.
Okay.
So, yeah, we flew into Boston University, Boston Conservatory, then into the battleground states, how lovely, Pennsylvania, so you start to look at Pittsburgh, and then you work your way through Michigan, Minnesota, Illinois, Ohio, and you try to keep it to one area. And that's what I did. And I went to some new ones this time. Fantastic school, which I've always wanted to go to because I meet a lot of students auditioning for LAMDA, and they've all been to this place called Interlochen. And then I looked at Interlochen on the map. I thought, ooh, that looks nice. And then I checked the temperature out. I thought, I don't want to go there. It's far too cold. But this time, bearing in mind it was the autumn, went to Interlochen. Oh my God. Well, their facilities make the National Theatre seem like a rather second-rate bungalow. I mean, they've got, I think it's 9 different programs. I mean, they have a purpose-built, huge building just for screen and audio, including accommodation for all the screen and audio students. They have a 4,000 out-seat amphitheatre, which is 4 times the size of the National, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the students were fantastic. And I'm hoping to meet quite a lot of them when I go back to Chicago to do the auditions. I also went to Syracuse for the first time. So I flew over the Finger Lakes, that was great. And they were wonderful going there. And another place I went to for the first time was in Ann Arbor, University of Michigan. And I was very lucky there because Daniel Cantor, who runs the program, he said, would I like to sit on his classes? I went, yeah, right. And so I sat in on his Chekhov class for 2 hours and his Greek class, where they are applying what they've been learning in Greek to a contemporary text. And the same with the Chekhovs. And it was absolutely fascinating, and you realise what a good set of students they were. And then I worked with them later on in the day. And Daniel, apart from running the program there, Daniel's a professional actor. And I noticed that he was in the original cast of Leopoldstadt on Broadway. And so I said, oh, well, that means you must know Teddy Millen. He went, yeah, and you know Artie Fruchard, yeah, you know Aaron Neal, because, of course, they all trained at LAMDA. And they were in the original cast. And what was lovely is they're still on, I don't know what it's called, Facebook or FaceAche or something, click, click, click. And so they were sending pictures backwards and forwards whilst I was there, which was lovely.
That's great.
Yeah.
Are you tailoring these lectures to the specific schools, or do you sort of like prepare a system of lectures?
No, I have 2 different lectures for the most part. One I do is the opening scene of King Lear, but with that I also do an introduction to the folio, because to show where modern editors have mutilated Shakespeare's text, and then I look at the globe a bit, just so that they get an idea about potential staging, and then we do the division of the kingdom, which takes about 2 hours. It's going to vary on the amount of time that the school can give me. I cannot do the Lear in under 3 hours.
Right.
If they can only afford 2 hours, then I go back and look at a different scene. Okay, it's the bloodiest scene in the whole of Shakespeare, so why not do it? But it's also, it deals with the largest female character study that Shakespeare ever wrote, Margaret of Anjou, and it's her confrontation with the Duke of York. And again, with that one, we're looking at the folio. Obviously, we're looking for textual clues, but also the way that modern editors have completely misfired on the text. And so we get them up to do that, and that's great.
That's awesome.
So it's generally those 2. I mean, I've got a friend who I stay with him and his wife and their daughter in Minneapolis, where I went this year. And of course, Aaron Preuss, he's got his own stage combat company. So I did a combat workshop for them. No, actually, they were good. And I'd be stunt people. But the other thing that Aaron keeps on asking me to do, and I've done it at the Guthrie for Aaron, is Shakespeare's English Kings. It's the family tree of all 8 plays, and it takes me an hour and a half to stick the blasted thing up on the wall.
So you take it with you in to
no,
TSA?
I send it out.
Okay.
They can damn well do the chopping and the cutting, but nevertheless, it's still sticking it up on the wall.
Yeah.
I mean, Rob Young, bless him, he has arranged, and he's managed to put my lecture onto the screen, which is terrific. So I could project it, but then I don't. It's how, as people get mutilated, murdered, or both, I can't remove them.
Yeah.
Whereas I can from the charts. So we'll work on that. One day I'll make it technical.
Sure.
For the moment it's not. It's sticky card, stuck on a wall, hoping that I don't remove the paint afterwards.
Well, and what's nice is we got to intersect with you during your tour in New York when we were doing our showcases.
Oh, yeah.
We had a conversation about your favorite American city, and you think you landed on San Francisco,
Yes.
in no small part due to the culinary landscape.
Oh, yes.
Do you have any must-do, because I'm going back to California for the holidays, do you have any must-do restaurant recommendations for the SF area?
Sadly, there was one I used to go to quite a lot when I was doing the auditions. That was called the Fleur de Lis, but it's closed. There was also, because I stay on the other side of Golden Gate in Marin, there was a wonderful inn there. Well, it was a fabulous restaurant. I think it was called the Lark Creek Inn, so it'd be at Larkspur. That's also closed. It was started by a chap called Keller, not the Keller. But in fairness, I mean, this year, for example, I'm going to be doing 18 days without a break.
Right.
Then I get one day off, and it's in San Francisco. And a very dear friend of mine, who I stay with him and his wife, he is very fond of wine. So am I. And Michael, he won Fight Night here years ago. Michael and I cross the Golden Gate, and we head off up to Napa or Sonoma.
Yeah.
Right. Well, if you ever go to Napa, go to Mustard's. It's called the Truck Stop Deluxe. It's owned by Cindy Paulson, and the food is sensational. And if you've won the lottery, then you can go further and go to the French Laundry.
Yeah, of course, right.
But yes, you need a very substantial bank account to go to Keller's French Laundry. But yeah.
That's after we make it, right?
That is indeed after you've made it.
I'm a big Anthony Bourdain fan, and I love that he writes about the lessons he's learned from a life in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And even if the Michelin star restaurant rumor is not true, you have had experience and training as a chef.
Yeah.
How has that impacted the way that you run a room as a director and a teacher?
Okay. Well, I suppose the first thing is I didn't train just as a chef.
Okay.
The qualification I have is in management. It was hotel management and everything that goes with it. So yes, of course, you have the kitchen training, but you not only are in the kitchen, you're on the other side dealing with the customers.
Right.
You're also studying law, accountancy, everything to do with the catering organisation, and that could be tourism as well. Although my specialism was gastronomy, because I like food, and my mother was French, so yes, of course. There's going to be wine, cream and garlic in everything. But what it did do, because when I trained at LAMDA, we didn't get any money off the government grants, because the same time I started at LAMDA, there was this woman of mass destruction who took over, Margaret Thatcher.
Sure.
And all the money was taken away from the arts. And so I paid my way by running a restaurant whilst I was a student.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we were lucky in those days because class ended at 5:30, and I would get on the bus and go up to South Ken, which isn't very far, and I'd be there by 6 o'clock, 6:15, and the restaurant would start. The first sitting was at 7:30, and then I was managing it, and it meant you last orders, you'd be out of there probably by 1 o'clock in the morning by the time you'd cashed off. And then you have to be in class the following day, because if you missed the class, you just wasted the wages. And so that teaches you something in itself, punctuality. Don't miss class. I engaged, I think at any time, I had 11 LAMDA students working for me in the restaurant. So I learned very quickly how you schedule, because they'd be going, oh, well, I can't do that because I'm in a dress rehearsal here and I got that there and so on. And,
nightmare.
And so therefore I was able to timetable very, very easily, because that was part of my training, was how you actually timetable something. And so when I came here and I was working with Colin Cook, I was doing the timetabling.
The Stripey Diary.
Absolutely, but I mean the main multicolored timetable, which was created by Michel Saint-Denis. I mean, it was used in Central, it's used at North Carolina School of the Arts, that multicolored timetable. I knew how to work it, and I work with Philippa at the moment. And Philippa gives me the instructions, and then I work on that, and it goes backwards and forwards until she's got what she wants.
Yeah, of course. Another hypothetical for you. If William Shakespeare comes to the present day for one dinner, and we're assuming he's magically able to digest all the modern foods, and has no dietary restrictions. And you're in charge of the menu and the wine pairings as well. What are you serving?
Well, I think the worst thing you can do is patronize somebody by trying to think, oh, well, I'll give them what I think they want, because the chances are you're going to get it wrong. So to start going, oh, I must go into my Elizabethan cookery books and come up with lemon possets and all the rest of it, the poor chap would probably go, no.
Yeah.
So therefore, don't patronise Shakespeare by giving him lemon possets. Do what you're comfortable with. Okay, you're going to have to balance it and probably find out in advance if there are any things like, I don't like fish. But I mean, you said apparently
He's magic. Exactly.
He's got the magic diet where he can eat anything. Good. So again, being French, it's going to have wine, it's going to have cream, it's going to have garlic, but it's going to be balanced. I mean, I'm pretty good at souffle as well, and there's going to be meat in there. So you get a balanced diet. You don't put cream in everything.
Oh, sounds delightful.
Yeah, should be.
What questions would you ask over dinner?
I think really you have to wait until you find out how the conversation is going, because out of that come the questions. If you go in there with a whole load of set questions, it's going to be such a stifling conversation, because you're trying to work out how you can spring this question and that question. It will be so stilted, and it just wouldn't be worth it, but it's to just let it flow, and there may be the questions coming out that you never thought you were going to ask in the first place.
It's a great answer.
So I honestly wouldn't plan. I mean, meeting the guy, oh my gosh.
I know, what a treat. As this is our holiday issue, do you have any sorts of holiday traditions that you return to during this sort of season?
Well, you've seen the tree.
I have. I was going to ask where the tree came from, if there was ever a smaller tree, or if that just
well,
was
there was. I mean, I've been doing the tree for years and years and years. And before the new building was up, I used to put it out here in the foyer. So that was the 12-foot tree.
Okay.
And then when we opened the new building, I looked and I thought, the 12-foot tree in that foyer is going to look like a Boy Scout at an orgy. And so we need to have something a bit bigger. And so therefore, I persuaded the head of finance. I said, look, can we have something 25, 30 feet? It's going to cost 900 quid, which it did, but it will last. Well, it's already lasted a decade. So it's paid for itself.
Yeah, of course.
And the decorations we already had. The lights, I tend to, obviously, I mean, a 12-foot tree needs so many lights. That tree needs 4 sets of lights. In fact, there's one lot which hasn't been delivered yet. But yeah, it's up there, and it's part of Christmas. What is Christmas about? It's celebrating the birth of an extraordinary teacher. And so I really do think that it is a time to contemplate that birth, whether you are a Christian or whatever you are. It is there for this extraordinary person and their teachings, which have lasted for 2,000 years. And I don't think we mustn't lose sight of that.
Sort of a pivot here too. If you, because you have such an incredible directorial history, if you could direct a Shakespeare play on sort of the stage, in my mind, the Olivier, at the National, in a full-fledged production, full set design, no holds barred, what would you choose, and can I be in it?
I'll let you know.
Okay.
Okay, you said the Olivier.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that knocks out quite a lot of stuff, which I'd love to do.
Really?
Yeah, and there's a very, very simple reason for that. And I mean, you've been to the Globe and presumably you've been to the Wanamaker. There are plays that will work on the Globe stage. There are plays that will work in the Wanamaker. Because there are, and it's the same as you go down to the Royal Shakespeare Company in Stratford. You've got their fabulous new theatre, which is a huge thrust. And then you've got this glorious intimate theatre, yeah? So, for example, a lot of Shakespeare's plays are what are called chamber pieces. And you can tell that because the battles happen off stage. So, for example, Julius Caesar is a chamber piece.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, they come on saying, I've lost. Whereas, if you look at the history plays, if you look at Lear and stuff like that, the battles are on the stage. There's much more bombast in those. Henry V. And so that's why I say if you choose the Olivier, then you've knocked out plays I'd like to do.
Right.
All's Well That Ends Well. The Duchess of Malfi, I mean, I think it's one of the greatest plays ever written.
Yeah.
But these are all chamber pieces, which is why in the Wanamaker, where it is dark and you've got the candles there, I mean, the Scottish play is another one.
Right.
You need that claustrophobia, which you won't get in the big space. So, yeah, if you're going to give me the big space, there are three straight away that spring to mind. Pericles, which I adore, Lear, which I think is the greatest play Shakespeare ever wrote, and another, which interestingly enough was T.S. Eliot's favourite, and I think is highly underrated, and it's what we did last night, is Coriolanus.
Right.
But give me the Cottesloe, or whatever it's called. No, it's not called the Cottesloe anymore. It's called
The Dorfman?
the Dorfman.
The Littleton?
Then I would start looking at the claustrophobic pieces. As where you do the Scottish play. Yeah.
Lovely.
Because it's a powder keg. So does that answer your question?
It completely does. Yeah. As trying to like become, come into my own as a young artist, I've been always trying to find books and pieces that I can read and look to when I'm not in class. Are there any books that you reach for that were either formative for you as an artist or that you return to sort of?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was at school, we were encouraged to read an extraordinary Shakespearean scholar called A.C. Bradley, Shakespearean Tragedy. Wow, okay. I mean, that's something you go back to again and again and again. But here's a bit of name dropping. When I was in Malibu, no, it's a very dear friend of mine. She's sadly no longer with us, but she was an actress. She'd played Beatrice opposite Christopher Plummer. She had a book on her shelves, and it was by a chap called Harold Goddard. And I picked it up, started to read it. I thought, my God, this is dynamite. They're extraordinary. I mean, what Goddard has to say about Romeo and Juliet, about the malevolent spirits there, and he chapter and verse about why the nurse and Mercutio are the malevolent spirits. I took it on the plane with me, and I went back and I thought, my God. As I was reading Richard II, Henry IV, 1, 2, Henry V, and his take on Hal is not a very pretty picture. Yeah. And it's very, very interesting because he gives you so much textual evidence as to what Shakespeare is doing. It's called The Meaning of Shakespeare, these two books. He is extraordinary, and he really does debunk a lot of these myths about but Hal was just the hero and everything else, and then you actually look and you go, oh my God, no, he wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're terrific. So I strongly recommend those. I mean, another book, my mate Joe, who teaches fight with me, Joe Reed, has been giving me for my birthday for a few years now. Jonathan Sumption, who's a QC, or now a KC, I suppose, King's Counsellor. He spent, I think, 25 years writing the 100 Years' War in 5 volumes. Each volume is 800 pages.
Oh my gosh.
And this summer, I finally got to the end of it. It ends in 1553, which is where when Henry VI lose France. I thought I knew quite a lot about the 100 Years' War until I read these books, and I thought, I know absolutely nothing about it at all. Yeah. They are fabulous. I'm not saying that's a go-to, because it's taken me so long to read them. I think it'll be a while before I revisit, but nevertheless I do. Whereas the Goddard, most definitely, and Bradley I'd go back to. And then, of course, there are other extraordinary ones. I mean, you've probably been aware of John Barton playing Shakespeare, where you've got the book and you've got that fabulous TV, it's now on DVD, or you can get it, I think, on YouTube, where you have all the great British actors, Ian McKellen, Alan Howard, Judi Dench, all in black and white, smoking their brains out. But, goodness me, what they do with the text, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
As I was doing my research, I kept coming across this metaphor you use for acting Shakespeare's verse of surfing. It came up in an interview you did with, let me find the name here, Rob Rosnowski for his book, The Introverted Actor.
Yeah.
And then it came up last night, actually, when we were doing our piece.
Well, that, in surfing, I mean, the expression I use is, do you fight the wave or go with the wave? And it's fairly obvious you're Californian, you don't fight a wave.
No, can't.
Right, okay.
Right.
Well, it's the same with verse, isn't it? Mm-hmm. If you go with the verse, you go with the rhythm, and the rhythm is going to change, which is something we were looking at last night, where you have the midline ending. But then suddenly, in Laban terms, you're gliding, and suddenly you flick. Well, that's what might happen with the waves. You're doing that, and then suddenly something happens, and you have to adjust. And it is like surfing, and so that's why yesterday we took all the punctuation out. And what was amazing was these actors found very, very quickly the rhythm of the piece and the operative words. So yeah, that's surfing.
Great.
I can't surf. I'm very good with a kayak, but
Oh, good.
yeah, I'm on the south coast of Cornwall. We don't have big waves. The north coast, they do all that surfing stuff.
Right. No, I'm terrible at surfing as well. Boogie boarding I can do, though.
Oh.
Yeah. I wanted to ask too about your approach to adaptation, because they're doing Margaret of Anjou right now, which is sort
Well,
of
they're doing my cut version.
your cut version,
Yes.
which is, I think it's like 16 and a half hours of text into, 3 hours.
It's a little bit longer than
Three and
that.
a half,
I
maybe?
hope. Yes, I hope it's about 3 hours, 45 plus intervals, yes. But
Okay.
we'll find out.
Good. Well, we're excited to see. And we did your abridged version of Henry IV, Part 1 last year. It seems like you have a bunch of these cut versions of plays.
Yes, I do.
What's your approach to adapting Shakespeare when you have a play and you say, okay, I want to make this for students?
Okay, well, first thing is get the narrative.
Yeah.
So there you are. You've got to tell the story. So there's your skeleton. And then you look at it again and going, God, that's boring. So you now have to add the characters and their relationships. And so that's why you'll see with a lot of my adaptations, I've got rid of a load of crowd scenes which go on for ages, where people are revolting, because I want to concentrate on the story of the relationship between, let us say, Queen Margaret and Suffolk, or whatever it may be, or Lady Anne and Richard. Cut those scenes at your peril, because if you cut a duologue that's 16 minutes down to 5, suddenly the journey is no longer there, and so you've actually mutilated the scene, and you're not serving those characters at all. And so that's why there are some big scenes left in there, in their entirety, down near. For example, Richard and Elizabeth, whereas there are other scenes which, okay, we've got the message, let's move on. And that's how I've managed to make it work. The other thing I try to do in my mutilation is to join lines so that you still get your iambic.
Right.
Yeah. Otherwise, suddenly the actor's halting and they don't know why they're halting. And they go, well, the reason you're halting is because I cut the rest of your speech. So that's why you have to try to dovetail.
Good. This is, I believe, your 47th year at LAMDA.
Yes.
And I think that's incredible. And I wanted to ask, what is it you think that sets LAMDA apart?
Well, I mean, in a way, I answered that question right at the beginning when I was talking about Dilly Keane and the extraordinary way that I felt embraced. And I think that's absolutely vital with a school. I mean, there are some schools where they might try to promote a star. I can think of one school that used to do that. Whereas if you actually create a group of people who are able to work together, you're going to inevitably, if they're supporting one another, caring for one another, if you feel supported, you're going to create great work. And that's, I think, what dramatic art is about. We had this very good actor and director who came to talk at LAMDA. He's not flavour of the month at the moment, Kevin Spacey, but he did say, leave your ego at the door. He's absolutely right. And it's about the way you feel supported. I know we talk a lot about the ensemble, but great ensemble, you only have to go back to the Greeks. You only have to go back to Midsummer Night's Dream. That is great ensemble. And it's utter joy. And so long as we can keep that, so long as every artist in the space feels that they are contributing and that they have a voice and that they feel they can express themselves, that's fantastic. And then you start taking risks. That's thrilling. People say, oh, yes, I love a dangerous actor. Well, how can you be dangerous if you don't feel supported?
Right.
Yeah.
I think we're coming up on the end of our time.
Okay.
But for our last question, do you have any parting words of advice or encouragement for the incoming and the outgoing actors?
Yeah. Okay, we've talked about support.
Yep.
And we've talked about the need to feel supported. But this was something, one of our former principals, when she went back into the business, presented the diplomas on Diploma Day. And her parting words, I think, were so right when she said to the graduating students, above all, be kind to one another. And it is that kindness, being kind to one another, that will take you on this extraordinary journey.
Well, thank you so much. I want to thank Justin, Leo, Austin, and Lily Rose for coming and helping out today, and Stephen Court and Rob Young and everyone else who's helped put this thing together. Thank you so much for coming in today. It's been a pleasure.
Right, now you can take off your hat.
Yeah, exactly. Happy holidays.